Welcome to the Gruber Power Hour Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm 𝗓𝐴𝐿.
And we are here to entertain you and talk about things critical power, UPS, and the special theme today is the largest data centers on the world. And you know what really started this was Sunday when we come in and do the AI podcast.
Yep.
You know, people hear AI, but it's an abstract term. What is it? Where is it? So I figured we'll dedicate a session to showing them where AI actually lives. And it's in these large data centers. So the image behind us is actually the 𝗏𝗏 data center, which is 7.2 million square feet in Nevada. And we're going to use that as our background today.
That's a great one. I got to ask, Pete, what'd you do to Claude?
Claude, good question. Claude is basking in the sun right now in the Virgin Islands, drinking Mai Tais and watching all the pretty girls on the... No, he can't do that because Eileen's with him, right?
Exactly. He's taking a page out of your book. He's somewhere in some other country, city, state, hanging out.
But he's still doing that and pretending that he's not.
Well, if he's watching, we want to say hi, Claude. Miss you.
Yeah, miss you. Absolutely.
Have fun. Be safe.
Tough shoes to fill. We don't have any rocks up here, though, and I'm missing that, but we have some of this electronic stuff, which
the
is...
show and tell is going to continue today.
Yeah, yeah. So if we're going to break right into the technical stuff...
Let's go.
Yeah, a number of things to cover here. What I have here in my hand is a electrolytic capacitor.
Ooh.
And this is a 𝗏𝗏 product, 12,000 microfarad, 350 working volts DC. So it's a DC capacitor. There's also an AC capacitor, and they perform the same types of functions except with the different types of voltages. This is used as a filter. And the reason we brought this out here is this is a wear item. In your critical power equipment, whether it's a lighting inverter, if it's a UPS, if it's even electronic gear, switching gear, these are filters that are designed to clean up the power or to clean up a wave shape. And the technology in here is such that it's like a short-term battery.
Correct.
It will hold a charge, but nowhere near as long as a battery. So it works well in applications where you're trying to do some wave shaping. The problem with these caps is they age and they wear, and they need to be replaced. In the critical power world, where uptime is very important, they change them every 8 years.
8 to 10 years is the lifespan on them.
And we actually track the lifespan of caps. So if you're on service with us, either a service contract or preventive maintenance, we will look at your capacitors, we'll look at the age, and then when they're due for replacement through a program we call Auto Notify, we use that for both battery replacements and for cap replacements, we'll tell you when your product or your caps are due for replacement. Now, the reason you want to replace them, this filter, and there are usually multiples of these, it's not just one in a piece of equipment like a large inverter, they lose capacitance as they age. But the worst problem with this is that they also become resistive. And the internal resistance begins to grow and get higher and higher. Now, in severe cases, when you've got a high internal or a low internal resistance in this case, these things begin to heat up. They put a strain on the inverter, on the IGBT transistors or whatever is doing your conversion from DC to AC, and they make the inverter work a lot harder and could even cause problems.
Correct.
In extreme cases, these things are responsible for thermal events, and what that means is this thing will catch fire.
Yep.
There's a little pressure release valve on here that typically will begin to manifest there's a problem, and that's the reason that you want to make sure you're doing preventive maintenance on your critical power equipment, because our field engineers look for things like this. They look at age, they look at that little vent cap there, and so anyway, that's the reason that you want to replace those.
I sell these all the time. I have a lot of customers, and you know what the information I always ask for? Because we only want to provide new. For when you replace caps and fans, and it kind of, they're like married together, capacitors and fans, you want to go new. And a few questions I ask is if they want to replace the exact ones. I always ask, like you were showing here, there's the microfarads is the most important thing of that capacitor, and the part number, which could be a 12-8, 12-7, and that's really important. And then if they don't have that information and they want to just do the entire assembly, because these go on a metal assembly, the cap assembly is make, manufacturer, model, KVA size, serial number, and then they marry that and they match together and they do a like for like or a comparable, which Cornell Dublier is a very common one, and there's one more that really works with it. But these I sell and I provide to my customers very much because they are and they want to keep the life of the unit going.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great part.
So this is one of the predictable maintenance items in your critical power equipment. It is definitely something that needs to get scheduled because there will be some downtime as we dig into the inverter. We have to shut it off, so we go into bypass. And
yes.
All right, looks like we've got a few questions here. YouTube, Highlander joined us. Hi, gang.
Hi, gang. Morning, y'all. Highlander always says, kindness is always free.
That's right.
He taught me now. I'm stuck with that phrase in my mind all day. So great to have you guys here. And
he demonstrated that kindness by sending our social media team a bunch of bagels earlier this week.
I heard. I was very happy to hear that. And that means a lot and shows a lot to, to the company and to the group and to our subscribers. So thank you so much for that. I know they ate a lot and we all enjoyed it and we are very grateful.
So EV fan from YouTube says, good morning, y'all. Thank you for joining us. We also ask in the other podcasts, just let us know what part of the world you're coming in from. We had a real big global contingent yesterday when we were doing the EV broadcast.
Really?
Podcast, yeah. And it's always fun to see both for the audience and for us where people are chiming in from.
That's awesome.
And it's impressive. Some of these guys, it's in the middle of the night for them,
Oh, yeah.
So... All right, moving right along here. If we can throw up an image here, Jesse, it's TT-1. And what I wanted to address here was what we do to prepare our technical resources for working on your equipment. What we're about to show here is a bunch of tech tips.
This is just a bunch of files. Want to show?
Yes, that's what we want to show. It is a list of the files or the tech tips in just one of the folders. And the way these are generated is when we get a condition in the field, for example, and there's a fix, that we will then document that and we will share and make that available to the rest of the field engineers under our employ. And what this does is it builds a knowledge base. Is that image not coming up well? Okay. Yeah, it looks like we need a UPS. Okay. So, yeah, this is just one section where we keep tech tips. And these are typically symptom versus resolution type advice. It could even be part number variations, new product that we found, better ways to do things, improvements. And we find that this is extremely valuable to our technical resources that can then, tap into some of the knowledge that we have accumulated. All right. The second thing there is training diploma, Jesse. We do a lot of training in-house, and it's in a variety of categories. And let me just read some of those to you. We'll see that diploma popping up here. And when they have been trained on a particular product or a particular function, oftentimes there are we have diplomas attached to that. And the types of training that we do is regular safety meetings. That's very important because we work around dangerous voltages and, in fact, life-threatening voltages. We do arc flash training, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll show you what happened when a UPS got hit with lightning, and lightning is probably the biggest arc flash on the planet.
Yep.
We do lockout, tagout training, which is, again, related to safety. Working with electricity, working with hazardous voltage levels, working, in environments where life and limb are at risk because of the dangerous voltages involved. Correct. And then, of course, first aid training. How do you deal with a problem that has occurred, and how do you resolve it, and what kind of steps do you take? Our field engineers, by the way, both in-house and in the field, also do a fair share of reverse engineering. and creating schematics and documentation. And the fundamental reason for that is the manufacturers of the equipment don't necessarily share information like this with a competitor like us, because we are independent maintenance. We're third-party maintenance, and they see us as a competitor. So what we end up doing is recreating the very things that they use, which are schematics, test point data, procedures, protocols to follow.
Yep.
And so that's all part of our training program that we described to you here. Any thoughts about that, Elvis?
Well, it's really good to have a procedure in place. So having a procedure and requirements where an engineer follows that, then you know that if every engineer follows that, you're approaching it the correct way. So it's really good because lockout, tag out, people probably don't know what that means, but it's securing when you're working on a dangerous unit. It locks out that device. It actually, a lockout tagout is literally a tag or a key, something that shuts it down, and no one can interrupt that until you're done with it and you come back and then you tag it out. So I'm familiar with that. It's really good to have these in place because these are high powerful equipment. We've had at an old employer where one did get arc flashed, and it blew up in his close to him. And he did have the proper shirt, but he didn't have the correct PPE, which we were discussing before the show started. So these things are very, very detailed and so important to, honestly, the survival of the engineer.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
The good state of the person working on it, because we're not at the point where AI, for this type of situation, it's not AI working on AI.
Right.
It's human working on a big battery, a big a generator. It can be so many different things. I worked at a company where we had to learn out the procedures of lockout, tagout, PPE, emergency power, the e-stops, things like that, because we're working on such high-powered devices that can, to be honest, it's a little rash, but it can kill you.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And we've had moments I've experienced where I had a work-related injury years ago. No one knows about it, and it's right in my right hand.
I see it now.
Yeah. You'll never know until I say it. A unit, they didn't do the proper lockout, tagout. No one, not anyone at the company knows this. I worked for a union company in Chicago years ago, and I was in training, and I asked the manager, I said, can we please shut down, do the e-stop, lockout, tagout for that? He says, no, we can't, because we have an inspection day and we have to be producing.
We need to continue to run.
We need to continue to run. That's what he said. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, I finished that section. I'm going to go on to the next thing. No, I want you to redo it. And I want you to go work on that unit. I'm like, but that unit's live. It's running. It had a motor, had an amp motor, so it never stopped.
Right.
So I was working on it, and I said, look, I don't feel comfortable. He's like, I just need you to go work on it. I had a rag that was hanging, and from the motor, it pulled in the rag from my arm, pulled my whole right hand in, and mutilated 2 of my fingers. I have scars to show, because the most proper procedures they ignored. And now they had set back 6 months with an employee that had to go do therapy, surgeries, operations, because they didn't follow something that can just go over your head and you see a piece of paper, you see this little things that you just showed. Oh, safety, OSHA, safety. No, it's very, very, very important, because I went through an experience and it took me 8 months to recover, to have, they said I was going to lose about 75% of mobility, and it was opposite. I gained about 80 back, 90, and didn't lose my entire. But just because of, they didn't allow me to work, to follow through on the procedures that I was taught.
Yeah.
And it just turned into a nightmare.
So you've got an example of
and it reminds me, because it's very sensitive. It ruined a lot of my nerves and damage, because it didn't slice, it grinded my hand.
Oh, yeah.
It was a tough one, but I recovered, and I'm grateful for it. A learning experience. I'm grateful that I'm okay.
Following those protocols is vital. You know, when I was a field engineer,
So important.
working in the computer mainframe business, we used to go out on sites, and one of the things we'd work on is line printers. Now, this is in the day and age when you had literally a large drum that was full of characters, and you had carbon paper in between, which provided the ink.
Yes.
And then you had fan-fold paper that was running, and these drums were spinning at, you know, massive RPMs.
And they never stopped.
They never stopped. Yep. Exactly. So to work on those, one of the cardinal rules was we had ties. You always take off your tie. If you go in there with a tie and that drum grabs your tie,
you're done.
Your face is going to be buried in that drum.
You are done.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are.
That's why we worked. So now that it's been a good 15 years since I left the place, I worked for mass production McDonald's bakery union as an engineer. And it was for McDonald's. They pumped out 80,000 buns an hour.
Right. And, an hour.
An hour, because I'm talking about they never shut down. It was 24/7. They had 3 shifts.
Right.
They never shut down on holidays. It was constant work.
Nonstop.
And buns, bread, the bread from McDonald's.
Well, with all of the restaurants, I could see where
Yeah,
they
and
were using
that only covered a portion. It wasn't for the entire U.S. It was just for like the Northwest because it was Chicago. So it was only a certain section. And they had machines that would bake bread in 2 minutes.
No way.
They had machines that would proof bread in 3 minutes. So the monstrosity of that equipment, if you went in there and you weren't following a procedure, it was your last day at work because you didn't survive it.
Amazing. YouTube Highlander says safety is all. Absolutely. We agree.
Yes,
and I'm
sir.
going to show you some more here in just a second. Jesse, if we can go to a folder called lightning damage, we can run through some of the stuff that happened. YouTube EV fan says that's brutal. Yes, it is.
It was. It was tough. The recovery was tough, but it was literally because the people that put it in place, the company, and they were union. They got investigated. It turned into more just to skip. Think about that. It turned into an investigation and turned into workers, all these crazy things just because they skipped one little minor step.
Which it should. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about human lives at stake.
So which one do you want?
The first image, they're in alphabetical order, and we can pop those up. And
First one is the arc flash.
It is 2010 18-18, and it's in the lightning damage folder. So what I'm going to show you here is years ago, we had a large computer or a large UPS system here. In fact, it was a newspaper. And they went down, 600 kVA GE UPS. We went in, and it looked like lightning damage. We're talking about arc flash here. Now, if you can see on that image there, there is not only vaporized metal, that's what that dark stuff is all about, a little bit shiny, you can see a little bit of metal flash in there, but it actually ate up things like copper bus bars and bolts. Let's go to the next image, Jesse, and that would be image 22. There we go. There it actually blew off some of the studs or the screws.
The metal screws.
Exactly, yes. And again, what we're talking about here is arc flash, a plasma bolt, basically, lightning, that is, what lightning is trying to do is complete a path to ground.
Correct.
You've got a positive charge up in the clouds, you got negative on the ground, or maybe it's, I think it's reversed actually. But anyway, it's trying to complete the circuit, and it's going to find anything in between to do that, whether that's a tree, whether that's you, whether it's a lightning rod, which is really what we prefer.
Yes.
That's why they put them on buildings.
Correct.
To redirect all that energy. And what you're dealing here is not hundreds of amps or thousands, we're dealing millions of amps. Yep. Which, of course, can vaporize metal.
A human can't survive it, so a UPS can't survive it.
Exactly.
It's very basic.
So if we continue here, the next image is 27. Yeah, there you can see some of that carnage.
The residue. There's so many. It's like a crime scene.
Yeah, basically. And then if we go to the one called arc flash, Jesse, that is a heavy-duty piece of equipment. There we go. And that is the net result of having a large arc flash, like either lightning or having a short in high amperage equipment. And you begin to understand now why PPE equipment is so important.
Crucial.
Because a human being standing next to this thing, it's questionable whether they could survive this.
Yep.
Oftentimes, there are also projectiles that are flying away from this, and they may be molten metal, which, of course, isn't quite like, a hard object, which can also injure you. So this is one of the reasons that we go to such great lengths to do arc flash training and safety training for our field engineers.
PPE.
They are working around this type of equipment. That UPS that you saw in the previous pictures there that had the molten metal, that was a 480-volt input UPS, which is 4 times the voltage level that's in your house, which can also electrocute you. So you've got quite a bit of,
There's a lot of voltage. There's a lot of power.
Yeah,
that
totally.
it's already touching. If it's your house, it's 120. 480, it's like you said, 4 times. So it's got a lot more bang.
Right.
To be fair.
For the buck. All right. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was co-locations. And you've
not
probably
apartments,
heard
not condos.
Not condos.
Okay.
No. Co-locations regarding data centers. And there are, most companies have their own server rooms. They have their own data, centers.
Correct.
And but when they get so large, and so much demand is placed on that data center, at one point in time, the accountants get involved and they look at the numbers and they say, you know what? It's more cost effective if we sub this out.
Yeah, let's move all of our data equipment, our data devices to where?
A co-location.
Co-location.
And, there's a huge cost involved in maintaining a data center. You have to provide thermal management. So you have to cool that
AC.
Because it's constant heat. Even if you're in Antarctica, inside a data center, you're going to have heat that you need to get rid of.
Correct.
Because there's a certain amount of BTUs that are generated by the equipment, which are in excess of, what's outside. Then you have access floor, which is the way you hide all your plumbing, all of your data cables, all of your power cables, because you certainly don't want that visible or have people tripping on it.
Oh, now they have a specific floor, the concrete floor, that's cooled to a certain temperature. I've seen that in certain data centers. Which, I actually worked for, before I got, being 12 years in IT, my first 5 years in the IT landscape was project management for data centers and for professional services, delivering IT services for a number of customers. CarMax, Target, many different ones. But I did 5 years of data center inventory, data center relocation, data center removals, shutting down entire data centers. We shut down an American Express in Minnesota, an entire 4 floors. We've done so many where I was very familiar. So when I hear co-locations, when I hear data centers, I lived in those for many years and huge customers. We went into one where, like you were talking about, this one in our background.
That's Citadel.
And
Nevada.
what's it say? What's the data center there?
That is the...
what's the name on the building?
You know what? I can't read it.
It looks like it's Switch.
Oh, that's a Switch data center. Okay.
That's a Switch data center.
All right. The Switch SuperNAP, I think, is that's the 3rd largest data center in the world. It covers 3.5 million square feet. And customers are tech giants like Amazon.
And where is that located?
That one is also in Nevada.
I've been to that one.
You have?
I got access inside of it. I needed a 2-week clearance. They had to check me. And one of the big customers that they take care of there?
I was going to read that.
Let's go.
All right. They've got Amazon in there. They've got Google in there. And they've got Microsoft in there.
Yep. And Facebook.
And Facebook too?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So that's why those are the customers that they're securing and taking care of. The security level, the detail, all the employees there and the security employees are either ex-military. It's very high end. You want to hear a crazy story?
Sure.
So we went, and our contact there that worked for the company I worked for at the time, he was our contact. He was a vendor / given limited access to the data center, and he went there almost every day. but he wasn't working for the data center. He was working for the company I worked for. And he was there stationed for 9 months, literally stationed. The last deployment we had where we were removing some equipment from a customer from that data center, he was there for 3 days. On the day one, he comes in, he says, no cell phones, do not this, do not. We're like, okay. But he's on our side. He's like, you have to be professional. Look this. We followed all the rules. Day two, at the end of the day, he leaves. He just goes on Facebook, says, tomorrow will be my last day at the Switch Data Center, drops a pin. Great time. Thank you for everything. Boom. Go in the morning, he got let go.
Really?
Yeah. Because he gave information, just what he was doing, where he was at per switch, just because of the security level detail.
Sure.
They released him. And we're all like, where was all that spiel of this and cell phones, keep this? And they literally saw him on his phone too while he was walking. He was in the lobby, and you can't have your phone on you.
Right.
Leave it in your car or you check it in. And he broke those rules, and they said, later.
Zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance. And he was there the longest. We were only there for 3 days on that.
Wow.
On that site.
Well, it woke you guys up. You probably towed the line pretty tight from that point forward, right?
Well, for me, no, that was actually my last one I ever did. So
Okay.
for me, I was like, what are you doing, buddy? Like, we've done so many. We've done Datacom. I've done T-Mobile. I went to Houston,
Right.
where they did BP and T-Mobile were their two big customers.
Okay.
BP, the oil. So
British
the security
Petroleum.
levels. And we had to go in and take... we had to do they asked sometimes to do in-house inventory because they want to know. One data center section had 45,000 devices.
Wow.
So it's just, there's so much information that people don't, they drive by and they're like, oh, look at that warehouse. No, that's a data center
Yeah.
giving us existence.
So when you look at that wall that's behind Elvis there, for security reasons, that is a 20-foot concrete wall.
I could jump it.
I mean, you can get an idea of the scale of this thing by looking at that. And the roof. Apparently, they are located in an area where they get some high winds from time to time, so they actually put a double roof in this thing, 7 feet apart, steel, and to make sure that no natural disaster would ever affect them.
Correct.
Part of the selling feature of these types of operations, these co-locations, is redundancy.
Correct.
Everything is double wired, basically. So if a server goes down, another one immediately
Backup
takes
for
over.
your backup.
Exactly.
And security, I think, is a huge one of knowing that your data is secured. It lets you sleep at night. Same thing with your phones or anything. When you hear, oh, there's a data breach in Apple or this, it gives you a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, like, oh no. So these they provide such a high level of security, and what you were saying, redundancy, knowing that your equipment is backed up and safe and super safe.
And they preach 0% downtime. Of course, they can't quite attain that. It's going to be 0.999 with a whole bunch of nines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that is the goal. And of course, that's the advantage to somebody that is looking to outsource their data center needs. Is it's going to be faster, better, more secure, more reliable. And again, once the accounting people get involved, there's a crossover point where on that spreadsheet it looks better to co-locate and to outsource
And
data.
the biggest companies in the world to do that.
They do that, yep.
All of our big stuff, Instagram, Facebook, Google, there's a reason. Comments, Pete.
Oh, comments. Okay, we got a few there. Are the Highlander, YouTube, are the Arc Flash rated Gruber t-shirts coming soon? I think we're still trying to get regular t-shirts, let alone Arc Flash, right, guys?
Yeah, there's some more logistics in that.
Oh, wow.
There are a few other things we got to get, but, we'll make it all available. If there's a market for it and people are willing to buy it.
Lightning-proof t-shirts.
We are merchants.
Pete's ready to sell.
There's an old saying, and I forget who said this. It was probably Plato or one of the early philosophers, but he said, or one of these guys said, the craft of the merchant is to take goods from where they are plentiful to where they are scarce.
True.
Very true.
These are so scarce, they're not even here yet.
That's right. YouTube EV fan, he says, I'll take a few. And he's got a shirt logo or emoji. Yep. YouTube EV fan says, Arizona has lots of data centers. Yes. We have a co-location just south of us here in the old digital equipment plant that I used to work.
Yep.
2500 West Union Hills.
That's because we have no natural disasters, really.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
It's safe. Or, well, we have heat. That's about it.
Well,
Yep.
we have an entire department dedicated and focused to data centers, the comm side,
Yep.
which you guys are working on, even providing a platform. But we literally have a department just to provide and to keep them going.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
guys, we manufacture data cabling
Yes.
products that outfit these data centers. We have data center
Exactly.
furniture from racks and shelves and network frames and fiber optics. And we're going to be starting, by the way, probably within the next couple of months, our communications group YouTube presence with a podcast to talk about some of these things. So there's a Utah data center that covers 1.5 million square feet, and this one caters to government agencies such as NSA. Now,
Yep.
can you imagine the security in that data center? I used to work at Valley National Bank here. We used to repair their computers here on the freeway, I-17. And the banks, of course, are very security-minded as well,
Yes.
right along with credit card companies like American Express. And I remember having to walk through what they called a man trap. It was literally stainless steel bars that rotated, kind of like the turnstiles that you have in the
Yes.
mass transit turnstiles. But this one was a man trap. You got in and you couldn't get back out. It wouldn't ratchet that way. And I remember feeling an eerie sense of being trapped whenever I went through that thing, because with a disaster, you couldn't get out very quickly there. Anyway, covering some of this other stuff. A single server farm, and remember, we're talking about 3.5 million square feet, 1.5. There's one in China that's actually 10 million square feet. And I guess that is the biggest one you were saying?
Yes, that is the largest one. And we're going to touch on that in the Did You Know segment on it is the largest in the world.
Well, hold that thought then, because
I
the
will.
Did You Know segment of this program is important.
Very.
Part of our DNA. But in this particular one in Utah, it covers 1.5 million square feet, and it has a bunch of these governmental agencies. The other thing that was interesting was some of these single server farms use enough electricity to power a small town. So think about that. That's a lot of electricity.
do.
Now, it's certainly not going to be Phoenix with 3.5 million people, but what would a small town be? Flagstaff, maybe? Yeah. Prescott, definitely.
Scottsdale?
Yeah.
Cities, even that?
Oh, did you hear that, Scottsdale? We called you a little town.
Oh, I mean, when I hear comparison of towns, I automatically go to Chicago, Illinois. That's where I'm from for 28 years. So when I hear that, I'm like, well, one of our little towns had 15,000
Yeah.
population people. So it's kind of, yeah.
So how does it affect you? How do you interface, or what is your connection to these large data centers? Well, you use them all the time and you don't realize it. From sending an email
Yes.
to streaming a movie,
Yes.
all of that requires an enormous amount of computer storage and processing power. When you buy something on Amazon,
Electrical.
going through a
All
co-location.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what these server farms provide. And what Gruber Power Services provides is the infrastructure, maintenance, and service for the equipment
Wow.
that's in these
Yeah.
data centers.
Yes, we do.
I have I've got an image here I want Jesse to pop up. It's called Plumbing Transformed. And we're going to show you what takes place in the basement of some of these large co-locations. And what you'll see is a bunch of pipes and plumbing. There we go.
Glad I'm not a plumber.
Yeah. And, this obviously has a maintenance crew that is first class and high caliber, because what they've done is they've actually color-coded the plumbing. Now, just going out on a limb here, I would suspect that the blue is probably chilled water.
Yes.
The red could be voltage. What do you think the yellow is, though? Not sure.
Sewage?
Waste.
Sewage?
I would say waste.
Something, yeah.
I would say waste. That if white or yellow, white if for PVC would be considered sewage in the construction industry, but maybe I would say waste.
Yeah.
Also by the bolts and by the look of some of the yellows to the copper, and I would say waste. The more I look at it.
For those of you that have been curious about what those colored paint stripes are on lawns or on streets at times, that is usually pre-construction when the contractor calls a blue stake type function, and they come out free of charge, and they will actually stripe where the utilities are underground so that before you dig, you're aware that there's a 14,000 volt electrical line, which is red, by the way. White is data, COX, that type of thing. Blue is water in that case, and sewage is green. So you were right. So those colored stripes that you see are done by Blue Stake, and it follows this kind of a format. So another picture we want to throw up is Citadel-4. Inside one of these large data centers, what does it look like inside? And this shot, well, not quite. Wait till you see this. There we go. Pretty busy. It's, kind of like Manhattan without the height, it looks like. But this is the type of equipment that is functioning inside these data centers.
Correct.
And the cabling or the connections to these are done under what's called access floor or raised floor.
Or the top.
Or the top in this case. Yeah, that's right. You've got the wire channels on top there.
I've had to take it out from both, where we removed floor tiles, and I mean thick, when we're just pulling and we're cutting, and they're fiberglass inside. We had to get strapped and go on with ladders and scissor lifts to cut and cable, because we were decommissioning these, and they wanted them empty boxed.
Right.
So we had to remove everything. All that was left was the empty network racks and just the piping. And then they even want us to remove the flooring.
Yeah, the access floor.
Yes.
Well, you can resell that.
You can resell it. You can reuse it. They wanted it for the next location.
Yeah. The Gruber companies actually are in the access floor business. We've been doing that for 38 years. I remember the first job we did. I don't know if I should tell you this, but it was for St. Joseph's Hospital. And back in the day, we didn't have a lot of skills and a lot of staff and a lot of know-how, but we tackled everything. So we took an access floor job at St. Joseph's Hospital. And with raised floor, what you have is pedestals. They're usually 12 inches, could even be 6 inches, 12 inches, 24 inches. And all of those have to be perfectly level.
Yes.
So the correct way to have done it would have been back in that day before lasers was a transit, just like a surveyor uses with a storyboard. And you level out your transit, and then you look around the room and you use your storyboard to set your pedestal height. Well, we were using a carpenter's level, one of those 4-foot levels. And frustrating as it was, by the time we got to the other side of the room, it was no longer 24 inches. It was like 30 inches because it was growing. It was going up. We struggled with that for a few weeks, and finally the customer said, look, I'm done with you guys. You guys got to get this thing, finished.
Yeah.
So we had to call in professionals. But anyway, these days, we are the professionals.
Yes.
We do access floor, and access floor is recyclable.
It is.
Hey, Pete,
Yeah.
why is there such a gap in the ceiling? Is that for expandability, or what in this picture? You see how much space there is in the...
I see that, and I
The
don't have
rafters?
an answer for that, unless that's part of that double ceiling.
It's also for ventilation.
yeah.
It's but for ventilation too. And it's also per code, certain pipes can't be as close to each other to equipment.
Good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look there, because we had to do a few for per design years ago, and if you look, even when they can't have certain pipes together, they can't have certain conduits and certain things together because it can go against code.
Gotcha. Okay.
Are all these data centers like ice cold?
No. The preferred temperature used to be 72 to
Now it's
74
68.
degrees. 68, yes. And they used to mandate environmental control for humidity,
Correct.
40 to 60%. And the reason for that was static electricity.
Yes. They are cold though, Aaron. When I get into them, I'll wear a long sleeve or I'll wear a sweater unless you work and you're sweating, but it's still chilly. It's 68. I mean, no one has 68 at their house.
An interesting historical footnote here. Today they can get away with 68 degrees.
They can.
But back in the day when they called them computer rooms, computer operators actually lived in the computer room.
Correct.
And they wouldn't be happy with 68 degrees.
No.
So that's why it was 72 to 74. Even at that temp, they used to complain
The
at
only
times.
ones that go under 68 they're called pods. PODs. And what it is you can have an outdoor one with like the container, but inside a data center, certain data centers, they might be in the older ones, but I know one, Clear Channel in San Antonio I went and did. And Clear Channel is the backup for iHeartRadio, which is the big platform for music. They had pods, and what it was like specific secure, like security within security for that room. And because it was covered inside the data center, they had to get it even colder inside there because it generated so much heat to where when you went on the back, it was hot. When you were in the front, it was cold. So they had to amp up the cold, maybe in like low 60s. But they won't go lower than that, Aaron.
That's the other advantage, by the way, to having an access floor system.
Correct.
Because in an access floor type construction, you can use the plenum or the cavity under the access floor for providing cool air or for moving air around. The way you do that is you then have vented floor tiles, and they're usually 24 inch by 24 inch, and you place those in front of the equipment where it's drawing the air from.
Correct.
So as you move equipment around, you move vent tiles with it to, take your cooling with you. The other reason you may, or the other thing that you may ask or should ask, why were there humans in computer rooms back in the day? The reason for that was we had paper tapes, 9 and 12 inch, tape drives.
The tape libraries.
Right.
Yes.
And operators would, take these tapes off,
put them in,
load another one, let that run for a while to do backup, then take that one off. They had carts.
Huge.
They would stack these on carts. They would take them to a backup storage room, also environmentally controlled. And the other part of it was disk drives were not always sealed.
They weren't.
That came with Winchester drives around early this century.
The technology for data-bearing devices are changing a lot too, because there used to be tape libraries. It used to be pretty prehistoric equipment, but they functioned properly for what was needed.
So picture a cake tin, all right? Something about this big.
A cookie tin.
Yeah. Well, there were 9 platter disk drives or disk packs. And what they literally did was they had washing machine sized disk drives. They would slide the glass door on the front open, put that large 9 platter disk down into that, close it back up, and let it spin up with a 3-phase motor. That's how disk storage was done.
That's how it was done. I remember I've seen those right when I started into the data center. Those were becoming obsolete and kind of prehistoric. They were phasing them out.
Yeah. It was actually the end of the last century or the 80s when Winchester disk drives came along, which were completely sealed.
And they looked. It's funny, too, because the way they looked, it connected to that time. They had like the beige. They had the color coding. And I was like, yeah, these look very old or just worn out.
Yeah.
Yes. 2 comments.
We got a bunch here. Instagram.
I do have a question real quick about those.
Oh, sure.
How much data is stored on just one?
Oh my God!
Yeah, like
Not a lot.
5 megabytes or something.
Yes.
Good question.
Yes.
That big cake tin with 9 platters, right? 9 disc platters with a gigantic head with a bunch of heads launching in and out of that, being driven by a large magnetic coil and a 3-phase motor. 40 megabytes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some old school
your
tech.
phone was. Our phones are like beyond that. It was really small. It was megabytes.
Yeah.
It was no gigabytes.
All right, Instagram, 𝗏𝐻𝐸𝐿. Hi there. How much does it cost if a co-location goes down?
It can go, so they say it's millions per hour.
Totally, yeah.
Millions per hour. And per the power outages in the U.S., we're at about 150 billion annually.
Is that
within those, yes.
Yeah.
So a data center, that's why it's the 99.9999, because they diminish it to the best because it's millions of dollars per hour.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a ballpark.
I worked on a PDP-11 deck computer in the late 1970s at American Express, downtown Valley National Bank Tower, and they had one machine there that whenever this thing went down, they were frantic. They would call in, and we need a field engineer instantly, and I don't care if you don't have one available, we need them now, And one day I asked them, I said, why is this thing so critical? They said, this is our float computer. When we take credit card charges or check, we park that money, even for a minute or two, in interest-bearing accounts. And when that computer goes down, it costs us over $100,000 a minute. Now, this was in 1978, mind you. Completely different valuation for currency back then. So, yes, it does cost a lot, and co-location uptime is absolutely essential. Ed Prelitz joined us. Welcome, Ed. You know, Ed used to work in your group, Gruber Power Services.
He's going to educate us right now with the data center.
Yeah. He says ANSI standard. Oh, Ed, I want you to know something else. You worked for Pete Koenig, and he was the service manager back then. Of course, Pete died about 5-6 years ago or so, but his granddaughter actually interviewed here. She said she used to, that her grandfather worked here, and when I walked in the room where they were interviewing, when she said that my grandfather is Pete Koenig, I just suddenly realized we've come full circle. She works for us now. She's in the Gruber Power Services sales organization.
Yes,
and
I met her.
Yeah, and
she's great.
Yeah, you probably remember this, Ed. Pete used to talk about his granddaughter all the time. She was a little kid back then. But anyway, that's a little tidbit of information that probably only you would remember. He's saying ANSI standards require plenums and ceiling heights in regards to the amount or type of equipment in data centers or server rooms. Thank you for clarifying that. That is an interesting bit of information. Then we've got Instagram, One Hungry Clippo. He said 67 degrees is torture. I can't read that. The camera's in the way. Is torture for humans. Yeah, I suppose if you're sitting in there all day inactive, that would be pretty cold temperature.
Very cold.
Highlander says, tell me about the Star Trek Enterprise disk packs. Well, they were expensive. They were very much in use. There were smaller versions, too. Digital had a 4-platter version. RPO7, I think, was that tape drive. The CDC also used to make those large washing machine disk drives, and they had an 80-megabyte version, which was completely state-of-the-art.
You ready for this, Pete?
Go
Just
for it.
to answer part of our question, the first commercial digital tape storage system in 1952 could store 2 megabytes.
2 megabytes.
Of data.
That's a little baby.
Real.
Yeah.
Yep. Where now they can hold up to 20 terabytes.
Yeah.
So that's a big leap.
You know, we forgot about memory. It used to be in the 60s and 70s, they had core memory.
Mm-hmm.
These were little ferrules that were wound with a wire through it, and they were done by ladies in Singapore that were sewing these things.
Yes.
And if you had a 4-megabyte memory board, that was pretty substantial back then, because that meant that you had 4,000 ferrules that had to be sewed.
And then Highlander says IBM disk packs, and I think ours was 8 disks. So he's talking
8
about in
disks,
data
okay.
centers. The 3 most common ones I saw for the data-bearing devices and network servers was IBM, HP, and the prehistoric one that was getting phased out at the time was Sun. Sun Equipment, Sun Appliances, SUN. But IBM and HP are still big, but IBM and Dell and IBM are still the main leaders that I can see in data centers. But HP, IBM, Dell, and the 4th one is Sun were the ones that I saw most common for. And it was just it was a rack, 1-2U, and you had a hard drive. You just plugged it in, and it could store 8. It could store 10. Like he was saying, he had 8 disks in one server, so it could store a number of them. When we're talking about the 60s and 70s, they had to use the tape libraries because that was the only way, and then they started upgrading to these, and now it's becoming way larger, terabytes, and the cloud.
So that switch nap that you see there, the background picture behind us.
Yes.
These things are so sophisticated that they actually have their own fire departments on site to deal with any incidents in a matter of minutes.
Yes.
You know, they're not going to wait for the local township to show up with the volunteer fire department guys when they have a fire.
Pete,
Yeah.
real quick. So we have a couple of responses to your granddaughter thing from Ed, and then we got to wrap up so we
Okay.
can get to the delivery after the
right.
Did You Know?
Good point. There's Ed. He's saying, if you can just move that up a little bit, that camera's
Let's
blocking.
get
There we go.
Highlanders. He said, don't get me started on PLC programming. PLC is personal
Yeah.
learning computers, programming, and memory, how really frustrating and bad it was. Go ahead to Ed.
Ed Prelitz, who worked with Pete Koenig, whose granddaughter works here now. He's saying, wow, she was a young kid those many years ago. Glad to hear that she made it to Gruber. Her grandfather was a wealth of info on NCR, National Cash Register. That's right, he worked there. He knew more about tumblers than a person should. Correct. And
Highlander. Zenith had the Navy contract back in the day. Zenith was I remember Zenith only had the TVs. They had the TVs back in the 80s. And radios,
yep.
but TVs is what I remember because we had a large monster one. I mean, imagine talking about the technology in that thing.
Oh, that was before circuit boards.
Yes.
Those, in fact, that was their claim to fame. They used to hand wire everything. They have a chassis. It would be filled with tube sockets. And then underneath, all your resistors, capacitors, and diodes and components.
And good luck moving it into your house because you could never get it out.
Oh, yeah.
That
They were
remained
heavy.
with the house forever because it was like hundreds of pounds. Now it was so heavy.
And one of their selling features was hand-wired and handmade.
Yes.
And, of course, circuit boards came out, and you
course.
didn't want anything hand-wired or handmade anymore.
Yes.
That was proof that machines are far more efficient
Do
at
you
some of
want to
these
go
processes.
quickly into a few minutes into the Did You Know, Jesse?
Yeah, we got 10 minutes.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
spend that wrap up on that.
Okay, we'll wrap up a little bit on the Did You Know. So, yes, that first thing on the Did You Know. So, the first data centers, although the computer has been existing since, this is fascinating. The computers have been around since 1940.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's when they first showed up. It was in 1990s that the term data center became commonly used in technology. And now the largest city and the largest data center is the one that we were talking about in China. And it is, the square footage is in data meters, which is kind of huge.
6,000 square meters. I
Yeah,
think
660,000.
Yeah, which is, by the way, 10 million square feet. I did the math because I was also researching this. 10 million versus 7.5 million square feet, which is the largest one in the U.S.
Correct. And when we're also talking about data centers, when we talk about the networking refers to the interconnection of the components of the data center. So the cabling, the switches, the controllers, that's what networking is. The storage is what data centers use to store companies and customers and clients' information. And it's very, it's high sensitive information. So data centers come along with that. Some of the facts about data centers, largest cities are magnets for data centers. So they love them. A sizable portion of data centers are clustered around large urban centers. More than 26 of the data centers are located in the 20th largest metropolises.
Yeah, the metropolitan areas. Do you know, there's another thing, too. These data centers we're talking about here that are out in the wilds of Nevada, for example, out in the desert somewhere, they connect to Silicon Valley. They connect to Los Angeles.
Okay.
The round-trip latency, meaning the amount of time it takes for a signal to reach and get back, is 5 milliseconds. Now, 5 milliseconds, let me give you a perspective on that. A 60 hertz power cycle in the United States is 60 transitions from plus to minus per second.
Wow.
That's 16.6 milliseconds, right? And so 1/4 of that 60th of a second is how fast the data is able to transfer. Now, we're talking about the speed of light, basically.
Yes.
So there is some latency, but 5 milliseconds is very good.
Do you know what state in the U.S. has the largest concentration for the most data centers?
No.
Let's see if they can guess. We'll give them about 25 seconds. I'm looking at the clock. See if you could throw out, even production, if you guys want to throw out.
I'm going to say Arizona.
Jesse says Arizona.
I'm going to say Nevada.
Aaron said Nevada. Are you going to take a guess?
What do you think, Cass? Most data centers.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Most data centers, Texas.
Okay. Pete, I'm going to let you go too. And I can't answer because I know the answer. But hint, you reference them in some of your
Des Moines, Iowa.
No.
No, all right.
I hope
Then I
that's
don't
not
know.
the case.
No, there is a big one in Des Moines, Iowa.
No, but they said the most. So the
Yeah, the
most
most,
data
yeah.
centers in
Yeah.
a city.
A concentration. And I
Take a guess.
If
And
I
it
had
ain't
to-
Iowa, I'm going to give you one more because
Well,
you're the boss.
if I had to venture a guess, I would say that it's not going to be a large metropolitan area because
You'd
these
be
things.
surprised, but go ahead.
Okay, well then, yeah, let's hear it.
Give it. What's your guess?
New York,
California. Hey.
California.
California has
Really?
over 300 sites and that's more data centers, but they have over 300 to 400 sites.
That is surprising considering their track record with overregulation, taxes, and really the skills involved. These things are not heavily staffed. It's not like a production line where you have to have a whole bunch of human capital to produce something.
Yep.
So that is surprising.
Do you know which country has the most data centers? We
No.
can go down the list. Number one, what do you say, guys? Jesse, Cass,
I'd say us, USA.
U.S.
China.
China?
She said China. They're
Yeah.
fourth. China's fourth. U.S. is number one. UK
India?
is second. What'd you say?
India?
India's not even on the list.
Oh,
They didn't make it. It's too hot there, man.
They just
They're
call you a
sweating.
lot in prospect.
No, they're sweating. They're doing that out of their house. U.S. is first. UK is second. Germany's third. China is fourth. The Netherlands, the Aussies, the Canadians, France, Japan, and Russia.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, these are some really cool things on data centers.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think that'll be my last one. And that was, I just wanted to give you guys some cool information on Did You
Awesome.
Know? And
Well, thank you. We were able to do the Did You Know? And the reason that we're cutting out a bit early, we normally let these things run just over an hour. We actually have a crane that will be arriving here in an hour and 5 minutes. It's a 45-ton crane. And let's do the Did You Know? Can you guess what it's for?
your cars?
Exactly.
know.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. There you go.
What'd he say?
Those three. He said the cars.
Oh, that's what I said too. I was like, oh, the cars, right?
Yeah. The three Chinese Roadsters have been in Long Beach, and they were loaded onto trucks yesterday in 20-foot sea containers. The problem is we don't have forklifts big enough right now that can handle a 20-foot sea container, and we need to put them tight together. So we've rented a 45-foot crane that is going to be plucking these off the trucks and putting them on the ground. And
The
next
containers
week,
are here?
the containers are there's a one that's already at Gruber Motor Company.
Okay.
And the crane should also be waiting there, but they're waiting for the other two that are still en route, but should be here at 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time.
I thought
our
you
time.
gave those 3 China cars to Elon because yesterday he threw out the SpaceX again. Did you see that?
No, what did
He
he
did
throw
another
out?
one. He did another SpaceX.
I saw that one.
Okay.
You saw that?
Yeah,
Did you
I
see
saw
it
it.
outside?
I didn't see it outside,
We
but
were
I saw
outside
it.
at soccer, and oh, like, we're getting attacked. I was like, guys, this is the third one I've seen it. He does it every year.
Yeah.
And we saw it again, and he did another one. So I was like, oh, maybe he threw out one of those China cars in space. Doesn't he always release a vehicle?
He did one so far that I'm
Once.
aware of. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was a Tesla Roadster. But
I thought you were on the space with him that time. I thought you were on the craft.
No, not this time. Although we're talking about that. No, seriously, we want Elon to buy these 3 0-mile Roadsters.
0 miles.
Yes, they were never titled. They were never in ownership. They were bought by a Chinese company,
Wow.
EV company, that was going to reverse engineer them and figure out how to build EVs. Remember, in 2010, there were no other EVs besides the Tesla Roadster,
Correct.
of any consequence at least. And so anyway, their goal was to reverse engineer. They went bankrupt before that happened, and these cars have been sitting in sea containers for 13 years, abandoned. So they were discovered about 6 months ago. The sellers, or the people that now own them, came to us and said, hey, we know you guys have a wonderful Tesla Roadster
That's
matchmaking
amazing.
site. Can you sell these for us? And I said, absolutely. And so anyway, we've been taking bids on those. Now what's going to happen is we're going to open those sea containers today. We're going to see the condition of them.
Wow.
They're going to be moved into our service center, cleaned up, and we're going to do an analysis.
Will you document this?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. I
Social
was like,
media.
actually, I want to see this.
Yeah, all 5 of them are going to be over there.
Wow, fantastic.
Taking videos and
Okay.
preparing for the big event next week, which is having some of the media people out here to take a look at these first-generation Teslas. So my goal with these is, I think that Elon Musk, and if you're listening, Elon, this is a good idea, and I think you should seriously consider this. You should buy all 3 of these, put one into every gigafactory front office area there on display. And the reason I think that that would be valuable to you is, well, a number of them. It's your first car. It's the car that built Tesla, that made Tesla what it is today. Without the Roadster, there would be no EV disruption or EV, adoption.
The
like we're having
billion-dollar
now.
business that it is.
Because remember, all the other auto manufacturers back then didn't believe that EVs were viable. So putting one of these into every gigafactory would be perfect. And the reason it's going to be successful is the world traveling Roadster, VIN number 507, that went around the world once in 2012. That car ended up in a museum in Munich, Germany. And for a year, they liked it so much that they asked for an extension. And the reason was because hundreds of thousands of people came to see this Tesla Roadster. We think the same thing will happen at your gigafactories once you put these on display in your front lobbies.
Amazing.
So think about it, Elon. And if you...
You got me thinking.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up.
We're going to wrap up. And
Thank you guys so much. Next week, we'll be back with Claude, and we'll discuss more on the upcoming raffle we want to do, where we want to hit 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, we're almost at
'Cause
600.
building. We're almost at 600. We're building.
Yeah.
We're getting really close. So, yeah, appreciate you guys. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.